All right, today I'm here with Dean Austin, Senior Electrical Specialist at NFPA in the Technical Services Group. And today we're going to be talking electric fire pumps. We're going to go over all the questions that you all submitted. So let's get into some of those questions. All right, before we get into some of the questions, I just want to set the stage, kind of introduce what we're looking at before we start going over some of the questions that you all submitted. We're in the fire pump room. As we said before, this is an electric fire pump. So we've got the fire pump assembly, which consists of the motor itself. This is the electric motor that drives the fire pump. This is the fire pump. This is a horizontal split case fire pump. So we've got the motor, which is coupling up to the pump. We've got our suction side, which is the water going into the pump, and our discharge side, which is the water going out of the pump. I said part of the assembly is the controller. This controls the motor, which runs that pump. So this is monitoring the pressure in the system. Once we hit a specified pressure drop, it'll kick on the motor, which will turn that pump. To keep this from turning on and off if we have small leaks in our system, we have a pressure maintenance pump over here. This is a much smaller pump, which kicks on and off just to make up for any small pressure drops. And we've got a pump controller over here just controlling that pressure maintenance pump, or jockey pump, as some call it, that would maintain that pressure. So this has a sensing line that goes over to our system and is monitoring that system pressure. So basically I have two pumps, a lot smaller one, which is maintaining all of that pressure. So that all being said, let's get into some of our questions.
So one of the first questions that we received was the requirements for a disconnecting means and overcurrent protective devices for an electric-driven fire pump. These disconnecting means are required, and they're usually found in the fire pump controller as we have here. It has a combination disconnecting means, and it also has a circuit breaker which acts as the overcurrent protective device. These are sized much differently than you would have a feeder panel that maybe would be for receptacles and lighting in a commercial building on a floor. These are sized according to the locked rotor current of the fire pump, and they are designed such that they will hold all of the locked rotor current so that the fire pump will not stop until a catastrophic failure has happened. So it's very important that these are properly installed and that they are properly sized according to the electrical code being enforced at that time.
So the next question we got was around circulation relief valves. This is an example of a circulation relief valve. I think the question was whether or not they were required. Basically, they are required. So what a circulation relief valve does is it is meant for when the pump itself is in the churn condition, meaning it's pumping water, but it's not going anywhere. We're not flowing anything. This circulation relief valve is meant to open up to allow some water to flow out. You can see over there it goes out to the drain. That allows for this pump itself to be cooled. There's a couple conditions in which you might not need a circulation relief valve. The first one being if we have a vertical turbine pump and the pump's actually down in the water. We don't need a circulation relief valve because the pump's constantly being cooled by that water. Or if we have a diesel-driven fire pump and we're using the discharge, we're coming off of the discharge piping going through the cooling system for that diesel pump, we don't need a circulation relief valve in that case because that cooling water coming off of it is causing the cooling of the pump. But for the most part, we are required to have that circulation relief valve here, and it is for cooling the pump casing while we're running in that churn condition, which happens quite often when we're doing our churn pump testing. So the next question that we got was around when do you need an alternate source of power or emergency power? Now, NFPA 20 really says there's only two conditions in when you're going to need some alternate source of power. The first one states if the power supply that you currently have or that you plan on using is considered unreliable. It doesn't really give much more detail. There's some stuff in the annex, but Dean, can you speak to a little bit about maybe how we would determine if something was unreliable?
Well, Shawn, the reliability, there's really no definition in the NEC, but it would be determined by the authority having jurisdiction or your AHJ. They're going to look at how often is the power interrupted? Is there a significant power outages frequently? Is it a multi-campus style? What's the reliability? Is it an on-site power generation? And then they look at, their outages to determine kind of how that goes. So, yeah. But it's really an engineer and an AHJ.
Yeah, so like a case by case. And then the annex of 20 has some stuff that you can look at, whether it's like the time frame in which you experience outages and things like that. You can always look at that. And then the other time when you would need it is if you're a high-rise building, then you need an alternate source of power, regardless of if it's reliable or not. Now, how is some way that we would provide one alternate source of power? How is it usually done?
Frequently, the alternate source of power is an on-site generator sized accordingly to the locked rotor current and possibly even the jockey pump, depending if that's connected in with the pump controller. In this example, we have a separate fire pump controller, and so the fire pump itself is just controlled from this. And so it's a combination disconnect and transfer switch. And so the line voltage would come in to the top, the utility, and then at the bottom would be the emergency or the load going to the fire pump, and then in the middle typically is where the emergency power or alternate source of power would be coming in, and then it monitors the flow of electricity from the utility side, and when it sees an interruption, it automatically switches over. Even if the pump's not called to run, it automatically switches over, so that in case the pump is called to run, it will turn on without delay.
Oh, okay, that's good. I was going to ask you that, whether or not it's only if there's a load on there.
Nope.
So that's good to know. And then so this is an example of the transfer switch. Another thing to add for NFPA 20, if you are required to have an alternate source of power, it doesn't mean you have to put in a generator and have a transfer switch. You could just do a second fire pump. You could do a diesel-driven fire pump and just have two pumps instead of the electric with a backup. So that's one example of you would get away with without needing to have that. But that's a good example of how we have that transfer switch. I appreciate, Dean, for you giving your insight in that as well.
Yes, not a problem.
So another question that we got was, what's the required inspection and testing for electric fire pumps? Now, all of that comes out of NFPA 25, which is the standard for the inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems. And basically what we're required to do is a weekly fire pump room inspection, where we're coming in inspecting things like making sure there's no water on the floor, no leaks. We're checking the valves to make sure they're in the proper orientation. We're making sure that we're properly heating the space so we don't have any freezing conditions. We're just looking at the condition of the pump. And then we need to do what's called the churn test. That gets done usually monthly for most fire pump installations, electric fire pump installations. And a churn test is essentially running the fire pump for 10 minutes at no flow. And that's just to exercise the entire fire pump to make sure that everything's working. So we do that on a monthly basis. That gets increased to weekly if we're in a condition where we're really relying on this fire pump and we want to make sure it remains operational. So some examples of that is if we're using the fire pump to supply the demand of a sprinkler system that's above and beyond the pumping capabilities of the responding fire department, then we're going to want to test this weekly at a churn test. Or if we're using this fire pump to provide pressure to water that's coming from a suction tank that doesn't have its own pressure. So in the case of this fire pump not running, we wouldn't have any water to the sprinkler system. So we want to make sure we're testing those pumps on a weekly basis. And then on an annual basis, we're going to do an annual performance test where we're flowing water out of all buildings are going to have what's called a test header outside the building to allow us to flow we're going to flow a churn, then we're going to flow 100% of the capability of the fire pump and 150% of the capability of the fire pump. And we're going to confirm that we're getting the required pressure and flow out of the fire pump that we need for the system. So that's just an example of some of the inspection, testing, maintenance that we're doing on the fire pump. Obviously, the fire pump's supplying a system, so the system, whether a sprinkler or a standpipe, is going to have its own inspection, testing, and maintenance, but that's just a little overview of what we're doing for the fire pump itself. So someone asked, what do we need to monitor on the fire pump itself? And NFPA 20 requires that we monitor the fire pump through sending signals to a constantly attended location. So for an electric fire pump, we're going to monitor for things like phase reversal or loss of phase, or running on the alternate source of power, or the disconnecting means being open, or the fire pump itself running. So we need to send that to a constantly attended location. So in some cases that could be a guard tower at the building where we have somebody constantly watching that. That typically doesn't happen in many buildings. So usually the way that's done is to actually monitor with the fire alarm system and then send all of our signals to a supervising station where that is constantly attended. And the way we monitor the fire pump is, so the fire pump controller is looking at all of those conditions, whether it's the fire pump running or loss of phase or phase reversal, and then it has contacts, dry contacts inside that we can monitor with the fire alarm system itself. In this case here, we've got our circuits coming in monitoring that system. And then if we have an issue, we're gonna get a supervisory signal at the fire alarm system itself. So that's the way that we're monitoring those and sending it to that constantly attended location. And then one thing I just wanna talk about as we're talking about monitoring alarms is many people think that a fire pump running is actually a fire alarm condition, when in the case is that it is actually just a supervisory condition. We're not going to set off our notification appliances and evacuate the building if the fire pump's running. Because we know in many cases, we're gonna be running our fire pump to test it on a weekly or monthly basis. We don't wanna have an alarm condition every time that happens, right? The real alarm condition in that case, if we had a sprinkler operate, would be our water flow switch on our sprinkler system, not the fire pump running itself. So just a little clarification, a lot of people ask, well, I should have my fire pump running be my alarm condition. And no, that's not the case. They're all supervisory signals that then are going to send somebody to come check out the condition and rectify it. All right, I had such a great time answering all those questions. Thanks again to Dean for taking the time to go over the electrical side for the fire pump questions. And if you have any more questions, drop them in the comments below. We'll try to answer them. Maybe we'll do another video like this. Do you have any other topics that you would like to hear us go over some of those frequently asked questions? I really enjoy doing that. And as always, stay informed and stay safe.